Good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. My name's John Whitney. I am the present chair of the Western New York Environmental Alliance. That's a volunteer role that I am glad to have taken on along with the rest of our board members. I don't want to spend a lot of time with introductory remarks this morning because I think it's really important that we use this time for the conversation that we hope will help to inform the 30 by 30 action plan for Western New York. Notice I said action plan. That's not a phrase that we have used before, but it seems like it's what we need to move off of not doing anything for 30 by 30 to doing something for 30 by 30. So we have a number of speakers lined up for you today, and they'll be spending most of the time for the first part of our discussion in their short presentations. Also notice I said short presentations. That was a clue for both me and for the presenters that we don't really want our presentations to go long because we want our time for the rest of the morning to be spent in conversation. And I'll let everybody know that the meeting is being recorded. It's being recorded in this Zoom technology. So up in the upper corner, you can see it says recording. That's true. And we may or may not do anything with the full recording, except that we'll have it as a record. In the corner at the table over there, Anna Prepara, one of our board members, is taking notes, and those will appear from time to time in the chat. There probably will be less notes during the presentations, but as we have our conversation with the rest of the room, they'll start to show up there. We're not using paper flip charts. We're using that technology and recording it here. I will remind everybody, you all figured it out anyway, that the exits are at the back of the room. They're the same doorways that you came in on, but we're supposed to say that. You know your way to the restrooms. We'll probably take a very short break in between the presentation session and the discussion session. Again, thank you all for coming. Thanks to our speakers near and far. We have one speaker that's joining us from Albany, which is part of the reason we're using this Zoom technology. And Lauren, you may want to turn your Zoom video back on at this point so everybody can see you. There's Lauren from Albany, DEC, and she and Julie will introduce themselves a little bit more in just a couple seconds. Much is known about the problems we face locally and globally at the environmental level, at the political level, at the social and demographic level. There are many plans and tools and strategies that have been assembled and deployed, but we know very much that we're not starting from scratch. It'd be nice if we were further along, but we clearly are not starting from scratch. Still, we're way behind in many respects on this 30 by 30 issue and so many other issues. So we need to address the challenges of apathy and opposition and denial and lack of resources and lack of clear public support and policies if we're going to reach this 30 by 30 goal. And I'll just ask the room right now, before the last few days when the publicity about 30 by 30 and this event was coming out, how many of you had heard anything about 30 by 30? So that's actually, in this room, not entirely unexpected. You are more engaged than most of the Western New York population might be, but still, you're not a representative sample. So many of you didn't raise your hands as well. So we know we need people to know more about what 30 by 30 means, and the presenters will be talking about that. We want everyone to have a solid foundation with broad community and organizational expertise and understanding and support and input as we work forward towards consensus and the options that may vary from community to community across the region, across the state, across the country, and across the globe. And with those opening remarks, I'd like to bring our longtime friend and the regional director of the Region 9 Department of Environmental Conservation, Julie O'Neill, up to the podium. And Julie and her colleague in Albany, Lauren Obermeyer, will be leading us with our first little presentation this morning, and Anna's going to switch out presentations as well. So Julie, thank you and welcome.
I'm going to be very brief, but I do want to just start and recognize the Science Museum for hosting us today. I was a kid, very, very small, when my brothers were doing Saturday science education here, and they used to drag me along every once in a while, and it was so magical. And it's magical for me to be here with Science Museum staff. And so I want to just put a shout out to all of the educators who are still continuing to engage with small kids, because I had no idea that I would be, many, many years later in a place where I could work and support this kind of initiative. I do want to thank the organizers for pulling this together. I'm very fortunate to have the responsibility and the privilege of working with the 300 and more DEC employees who serve this region, a couple of which are joining us in the audience today or may have been in some state capacity. But the state has well over 3,000 employees who are working to help just in the Department of Environmental Conservation, protect the environment. And much like those who helped me get my early start in the career, we depend on each other for expertise. So when the amazing folks asked me to speak, I had to find the right person in Albany who had been really digging deep on this. And fortunately, much kind of like I was when I started my work in the environmental field, and Linda Schneekloff plucked me from, kind of obscurity. Lauren Obermeyer has been working on this quietly in Albany and researching and digging up this work. Lauren is a recent grad of SUNY Oneonta with a dual major in environmental sustainability and geography. She's been working on 30 by 30 for our Albany team and is providing technical support out to the regions. And she's also been part of our open space team. So I am really thrilled to be able to hand the rest of our DEC presentation component over to Lauren to showcase her amazing expertise in this area, and invite her to be, kind of guiding you and giving you the bigger picture about what DEC has been doing on this. I would also just put in a note that we are in the midst of the New York State open space planning process. We are doing those meetings locally, and we'll be sharing. The next meeting is going to be on November 21st. 3 of the meetings are open to the public. There's one in November, December, and January, and we'll be sharing that information with the organizers so that you can participate in that process as well. It's one of the pathways forward for implementing this work. So with that, I'll hand it off with incredible gratitude to Lauren, because I had a couple of things this week that really inhibited my ability to do this deep research, and she was already gearing to go. So thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Julie, for that nice introduction, and thank you to the organizers of this event for having me today. I think this event is exactly what we need to kickstart 30 by 30, so thank you for being a role model for other regions. Thank you. As you can see on this first slide, 30 by 30 is the goal to conserve at least 30% of lands, inland waters, and coasts by 2030. Next slide, please. So in 2010, the United Nations Convention on Biodiversity set a goal of conserving 17% of the world's lands by 2020. In 2019, environmental groups produced the 30 by 30 model in reaction to climate change and the mass extinction event that we're seeing today. In 2021, President Biden signed on to 30 by 30 1 week into office. And in 2022, at the 15th United Nations Biodiversity Conference, nearly 200 countries joined. And it was enacted in New York in December 2022. And national support is growing on local and state scales. So far, 15 states have joined, over 50 Native American tribes, over 450 state and local leaders from 43 states, 342 NGOs and businesses, and 86% of voters support the effort. Next slide, please. So scientists have found we are obviously in a biodiversity crisis. The World Wildlife Fund found that vertebrate populations are declining by 69% globally. And the 30% number was found by renowned biologist E.O. Wilson, who argues that we need to conserve 50% to protect at least 80% of species from extinction. And that number was really the mid number of scientific research was the 50%. So 30% is the minimum really needed for change. And the map shows locations of rare species and significant natural communities in New York State. It's evident that we have diverse life here that needs protection. Next slide, please. And 30 by 30 is so important today because of the increase of global development happening. Scientists have found that human activity has severely altered 75% of global land, and at current rates, less than 10% of the Earth will be free of impact by 2050. New York State is also home to some of the most threatened farmland in America, losing the equivalent of 5,000 farms to human development since the 80s. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So conservation also mitigates climate change. They go hand in hand. So protected natural areas are critical to stabilizing the climate and reducing the risk of the most severe impacts. So these impacts are floods, increased wildfires, invasive species, natural disasters, and so on. So climate change's effects on habitat is forcing wildlife to new areas while pushing other species closer to extinction. So to combat these trends, scientists argue that we need to conserve 30% and even an additional 20% to be designated as stabilization areas to stay below the 1.5 degree change. Next slide, please. Equity is a main pillar of 30 by 30. The U.S. Department of Interior states 30 by 30 should provide equitable access to all communities to nearby green space, the ability to reach it, and features that honor and welcome diverse languages, histories, and uses of parkland. Also, 30 by 30 is important because in America, we see unequal access to green space among demographics, which we are also looking into more at the state level. And on top of this, minorities face disproportionate cost to nature's decline. So for New York State, and a priority for us in 30 by 30 is to empower Indigenous nations and representatives through consultation in 30 by 30. And we are starting to do this through planning through the open space plan. We are involving Indian affairs and Indigenous groups into the planning. So we are trying to get that done now. So the guidance from the Convention on Biological Diversity says that these three pillars of recognition, procedure, and distribution, they're basically guides for 30 by 30 equity. So next slide, please. Thank you. And in the law, it states a coordination with the state land acquisition plan. Wetlands are essential for biodiversity, so they are highlighted in the law. Also, an important aspect of 30 by 30 is connectivity, so that I will be getting into more later. Equitable outdoor access, diverse landscapes are also important. Consultation with ag and markets. Next slide, please. Climate resistance, collaboration is also a key. It makes it a lot easier to collaborate with existing programs and people, for example, like the groups here today. Public input, collaboration with tribal partners, and participating in regional, national, and international efforts. Next slide. So recommendations. So collaboration is key. Like I said before, it makes it a lot easier to get things done with partnership. And the EPA suggests that connected corridors are really important for 30 by 30 to facilitate migration. And work with local tribes and minority groups is definitely important. In trying to incorporate local opinion, because they're often the best stewards of the land. So getting that local aspects is really important. And the resiliency of land matters. Is it going to last in 10? Is it vulnerable to climate change, degradation in 10 years, for example? And low disturbance habitats are cost effective and low hanging fruit projects to get us going. Next slide, please. So a lot of conversation has been going on about the definition in New York, especially in DEC. We are developing our definition, but the best tracking right now that we have available for 30 by 30 is the Protected Areas Database. It's official inventory of the U.S. conserved land, and it's the best available science to track 30 by 30. You can see in the graph to the right, gap status 1 and 2 are being counted nationally to track 30 by 30, and we're at 12% nationally with that. California's definition is there below. So Vermont has their own definition as well. So we are developing our definition, but right now the gap status is the best way to define, I guess, the land. Next slide, please. And California has a very advanced program for 30 by 30. They have $100 million tribal nature-based solutions program. They have a whole department for 30 by 30. They're at 24, almost 25% conserved. They have a cutting edge mapping program. So they have regional mapping analysis for each region, showing 5 maps that you can see here. It's just very advanced. And I think it's great for New York to look at California. Next slide, please. And so this is our current status. We're at 19 to 20%. And this can be found at nipad.org/interactive map if you want to look at that. Next slide, please. And that's everything. So thank you so much for having me.
And I just want to thank Lauren for helping us and kind of giving us that global overview. She's done a fantastic job as somebody very well researched in terms of how New York State is approaching this. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
If you'd like to bring the agenda up again, Anna, we'll continue on with our next speaker. And I know you're flipping the presentation as well. And Margaret doesn't have a PowerPoint presentation anyway, so we can bring Margaret Wooster up and make whatever adjustments we need for volume. But Margaret, let's speak from the podium if you could, please. Margaret, we'll let you also introduce yourself for those people who don't know Margaret. Almost every, maybe we'll turn it this way because
you can't see me otherwise. Yeah.
there.
Okay. Oh, that's perfect. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to read this because of time. I'm going to hold my watch here because of time. And I hope I get to say the last thing I want to say, which I haven't written down. So 30 by 30, what is it? First, it's not a limit, it's a goal. It's not saying we can't go any lower than 30% protected natural land in New York
But the
State.
but the microphone can go way lower.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Is that better?
You can see you now.
Okay, good. So we can't go any lower than 30% protected natural land in New York State or any of its regions or watersheds. We're saying we need to reach up to 30% to avoid continuing loss of the natural landscapes and native plants and animals on which we depend. I'm making a point of that because that was a surprise to me. I thought 30% was as low as we can go and then we're in trouble, but no, we're in trouble. We haven't gotten to that yet. The urgency comes with the recognition that we have crossed a line by ignoring the value of all this. The supply of healthy water, healthy air, healthy soil, viable fish and wildlife habitat is running low, well below 30%. We feel it mainly in climate change, hotter summers, more bad air days, severe storms, bigger and more frequent floods. Collectively, in the lower 48 states, we may be at 5% left of natural land and water. In every region, the list of vanishing species grows longer. Here we have lost 70% of the vertebrate species we knew just 10 years ago. What can we do? We can become more aware of the value of what we have and how it can be lost. In the late 1980s, the DEC and Department of State mapped the Buffalo-Lackawanna Lake Erie coast and identified 5 significant coastal habitats, from Smokes Creek shoals to the 400 acres of fast-flowing waters surrounding our water intake at the Niagara River bottleneck, and including Tift, the Small Boat Harbor, and Times Beach. They documented their significance to Great Lakes fish and to global populations of migrating birds who stop here, especially in spring, to rest and feed, the first open water on their long journey north. Over the last 10 or 20 years, the DEC and its equivalent in other states, other Great Lakes states, as well as NGOs like Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper and the Nature Conservancy, developed action plans to conserve these habitats based largely on percentages of natural cover, vegetated coastal wetlands, intact riparian forest, large tracts of grassland, our most at-risk habitat type. I had the honor of working with Waterkeeper, DEC, the Nature Conservancy, and others for over 3 years on one of these plans for the almost 1 million acre Niagara River watershed, including its 11 tributary subbasins. What do we have and what can we do to protect and restore it? I'm not sure how widely the Niagara River Habitat Strategy Conservation Plan is used, or if it's used at all. In preparing for today, I asked our Western New York Environmental Alliance team, why not just use these materials? Why start from scratch? Why ask everyone, what do you want? And my team's response was, we need to start where people are at, their gardens, their neighborhoods, and so forth. We are not starting from scratch on an inventory of what we have, except in actualizing this. So in short, probably most of you in the room are aware that we are losing our battle to protect natural land, but so we know that, so that's good, but we are losing the battle in actualizing that. We've been to court, we've lost in court on the Outer Harbor and twice. And we have other examples too, where there's a big fight and a strong local campaign to fight for places like Alabama Swamp in Genesee County against a development there, but we're losing so far. In preparing for today, I said that already. Okay, so we need to learn the value of what we have. The Outer Harbor, Buffalo's Emerald Coast, and those significant habitats approached by the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation as vacant and underutilized. It's miraculous natural recovery from that attitude, the miraculous natural recovery that was happening on the outer harbor after 100 years of industrialization has now been remade into another shovel-ready site for new development. Speculative, not clear what it's going to be even now. And yet the cottonwood groves, the restoring fish in places like the small boat harbor, we're losing that. What can we do? Understand that the business of development agencies like the ECHDC is to make shovel-ready sites. And in so doing, we are digging our own graves. We have to learn what we have, and we have to fight for it. And in the shovel-ready sites, I can quote this article from the Buffalo News on November 4th. The stamp site in Genesee County gets $56 million boost. And that's from our governor, giving $56 million to stamp to continue building a shovel-ready site out there just south of the Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge, which is New York State's largest wildlife refuge, and adjacent to the Tonawanda Seneca Nation. And so I want to kind of conclude that with this is shovel-ready sites is what the mandate is for our politicians, for our state, economic development, shovel-ready sites. And that means clearing, even if we don't even know what we're clearing it for, or if anybody will come and do anything good there. It's speculative to the highest degree. And so I also want to conclude with telling you probably, maybe some of you already know this, that today is the commemoration of the 1794 Treaty of Canandaigua, which was really important to the Seneca, who were guaranteed the undisturbed use of their territory for forever, as long as the grass grows and the sun comes up. 220-year-old treaty. And there's a big event this afternoon from 2 to 4 at Canandaigua, where people are going to protest the problem with what's happening in Genesee County, and this development of the industrial campus called STAMP, Science, Technology, and Manufacturing Plant. That is going ahead. It's 1,200 acres. It was purchased by an economic development agency. And as long as we have these economic development agencies funded by New York State, who are in charge of some of our most precious environments, including Alabama's swamp, the Sixth Great Lake, and Buffalo's Lake Erie coast, we will lose, because all of the money and resources is being poured into that. So what can we do? We have to fight those. We have to stop those. And maybe some of you might even want to go to Canandaigua this afternoon and help with the protest. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Marcus, if you want to make your way up, we'll use that those words of wisdom and perspective to help inform the rest of our morning and our dialogue that will continue a little after 11. So I'm going to turn this around, raise it up, and back towards Marcus. And should be ready to go momentarily.
Perfect. Okay. I think you can hear me. All right. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
My name is Marcus Roston, and I am the director of the Western New York Wildway for the Western New York Land Conservancy. And I'm here today to share what the Western New York Land Conservancy sees as our mission to protect the most climate resilient lands and the most critical lands for wildlife habitat in Western New York, and how we think that 30 by 30 is going to be a great tool to see to that vision. And for those who don't know, the Western New York Land Conservancy, we are the regional land trust, who our mission is to permanently protect land with significant conservation value in Western New York, both wildlands and agricultural lands. And we work in all 8 counties of Western New York, steward 22 nature preserves, and right now have over 7,000 acres of protected land under our stewardship. And we are currently working on protecting about 4,000 more acres at the moment. So we are currently working on building our land protection work, and we are starting to now look towards how can we continue to protect the most important agricultural and wildlands in Western New York, but with climate change and our biodiversity crisis looming so large, we are trying to look forward to how can we strategically protect these lands and come up with a vision to make Western New York ecologically viable into the future. And as climate change as one of our biggest factors, and wildlife corridors or our wildlife habitats being one of the most crucial areas to protect, we are going forward with a vision of landscape scale conservation to see that Western New York stays as ecologically viable as possible. So what is landscape scale conservation? So landscape scale conservation involves protecting core areas of habitat, so areas that have our largest, most intact places for wildlife, and figuring out how we can link them together through linkages and corridors. Kind of like what was mentioned in the DEC presentation on how we need to prioritize connecting our lands to each other. So our wildway is composed of cores, linkages, and then compatible use areas in between those areas that allow wildlife to move through them. And that is what kind of birthed the Western New York Wildway. The Wildway is a landscape scale conservation plan to ensure ecological viability to protect biodiversity across Western New York. We are connecting and protecting Western New York's largest remaining forest in the 8 counties of Western New York, and we are connecting those to the greater Eastern Wildway. So the Eastern Wildway is what our partners at the Wildland Networks visualized in 2019 in this map, showing if we were to protect the most important land in the East Coast, if you were to protect 50% of that, what would that look like? And they did this on the continental scale. They showed where are our core areas of habitat and where are those linkages that protect them. And this map is what spurred our thinking of, hey, look at that. Western New York is up there. We are part of this network. How can we make that a reality here in Western New York? And when you zoom in, this is what the Eastern Wildway looks like in terms of that continental scale. So what we are doing at the Land Conservancy is we are using data and our local knowledge to build upon that inspiration. And this is what we have, well, the Eastern Wildway inspired for us here at the Land Conservancy. And that culminated into our plan for the Western New York Wildway. So this is our map showing where we have our most important areas of core habitat being those dark green areas. And you can start to see some of the places we know and love, like Allegheny State Park down there on the Pennsylvania border, Letchworth State Park, Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge that Margaret was just referring to. And we were able to build out the Wildlands Networked inspiration for Western New York, encompassing Chautauqua County. We are able to connect the Wildway to both Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, and we are able to highlight where are the most important areas in between these core habitats to protect, being those kind of light green areas. So this is our vision for where is the most important areas to protect in Western New York and where we should be focusing our efforts. And where are we today? So currently, by our calculations, about 6% of Western New York is currently protected. You can kind of see all of those green areas of land. And about 9%, close to 9% of the Western New York Wildway planning area is currently protected. And we have 14% of the prioritized wildway, so where we have our priority linkages, is currently protected, and about 30% of our core areas are protected right now. The crucial part is only 1% of our linkages are currently protected. So this is where we see our calling to go forth and protect more land within this planning area. So where does 30 by 30 come into play? Our partners at the Wildlands Network recently released their plan or recommendations for New York State as we embark on this mission, and we find that they are important for us as we continue to focus on the wildway. So as we go forth, we want to make sure that we prioritize areas that have the highest biodiversity value and expand on our existing cores to achieve larger cores, because the larger your core is, the more climate resilient your land is. We should also prioritize conserving connected lands, since protected cores are often too small to sustain wildlife, and as climate change continues to change our local atmosphere, it's going to cause species to move to find their ideal space. So as lands need to be protected to stay viable. And then we should also pursue land conservation projects in close proximity to existing protected areas so that they can be integrated into existing management units and kind of lessen that stewardship burden. So the Wildlands Network, they put together this map of their recommendation of putting in those layers of wildlife value, connectivity value, and proximity to protected areas of where we should be focusing our efforts for 30 by 30. And you can almost see the wildway footprint illuminating here in Western New York. So where are we today? As was shared before, here is the current status of protected lands in New York State. We're at about 20% of New York State being protected, and we need to protect probably about 2 to 3 million more acres to get to our 30 by 30 goals. And 30% of Western New York is about 1.2 million acres. And we're at about 250,000 of that being protected, with the vast majority of that being in the wildway currently. So by our count, we need to protect just shy of 1 million acres in our Western New York wildway footprint in order to reach our 30 by 30 goals. So a little bit of a challenge, a calling for us to step up to. And as you can see, as we go forth, right now, a lot of our protected lands in New York State are focused in our Adirondack and our Catskill areas, and we see this as an opportunity to focus going forward in our Western New York area to get more state protected lands. So our next step is we are working on a couple of wildlife occupancy studies to further inform where we should prioritize our land protection. We're working on outreach to municipalities and stakeholders. I'm working on building our Western New York Wildway Partnership, which is going to be agencies, organizations, individuals coming together to build on this vision, because you can see just shy of 1 million acres is no small feat. We can't do that by ourselves, so we're going to be working with all of you as partners to achieve that. So I don't know if we have questions. Well, actually, we're going to talk about questions later. So thank you all very much, and we look forward to achieving 30 by 30 in our Western New York Wildway.
Don't you love the youthful enthusiasm? I think that's actually pretty critical to this whole endeavor. So thank you, and Marcus, and the rest of the younger faces in the room, because again, it's really pretty important. Our next speaker, you ready, Greg? Greg Stevens. We'll let you come up and introduce yourself and do the cues for the advancing of the slides again. And although we recognize Marcus for his youthful face, we'll recognize Greg for his experience and his perspective and all that he will bring to our discussion this morning.
That was very, very diplomatic, John. Thank you. I am a little older than Marcus, but I'm glad to have him here. It's good to be with you all, my friends. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Greenway. Many of you are very familiar with the Greenway. I have to pinch myself some mornings in my gratitude for the fact that it exists. It's a 50-year contract, putting $500 million towards the improvement of the environment and the human condition in the Niagara corridor. So it's a very specific application. Many of you have expressed concerns through the years of the lack of focus of the Greenway on its mission. And it's true that it manifests itself through a semi-political process, and politics sometimes get in the way of environmental policy. It's been my great good fortune to be involved with the Greenway over the last 11 years. We have in that time period put a priority focus on the completion of the trail, the Greenway Trail along the waterfront, on the theory that all communities deserve to be connected to the trail. And if you don't complete the trail, what have you really done? Going back to connectivity in a different sense. But the goal, the twin goals of, we go to the next slide, of the Greenway have been to create a functional ecosystem, a functional riparian ecosystem. Thanks for that word, Julie, many years ago taught me, along the entire length of the Niagara River. So priority on the trail and ecological restoration. Today, the trail is nearly finished. Its budgeted segments remain to be constructed, but most of that will happen in this coming summer of 24. So we've placed an increasing emphasis on community engagement, getting community, especially youth and especially disadvantaged communities, involved in the trail, aware of the trail, out performing stewardship activities on the trail so that they get to experience the Niagara River with their feet wet and their hands dirty. So Michelle Lockett, who's here with us today, is our lead on community engagement, and we're significantly ramping up that program. But it's important to recognize, even with a 50-year contract and $500 million, the Greenway is really just a plan. It's a plan and a channel, a pathway to funding. We own nothing, we control nothing, but signage. We do have control over the signage that goes up and down the shoreline trail. What we get done through collaboration. We every week in our team meetings, we say we convene and we coordinate. Who can we bring together and focus on the priorities for the Niagara corridor? We convene and coordinate 13 municipalities, 2 counties, 6 state agencies, all with a singular focus on the ecological health of the Niagara corridor. We also convene and coordinate with partners, and 2 of our most important partners in the conservation work is the Western New York Land Conservancy and the Buffalo Niagara Waterkeepers. Nancy Smith is here, who taught me so much about the Land Conservancy and worked to bring them as a powerful force to the Niagara corridor. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that because it's the other end of their work from what Marcus presented. And the Waterkeeper, of course, without Linda and Margaret and Julie and their early work with me and the Waterkeepers has informed so much of what we're doing. So I want to give you a very quick overview of the impact that these organizations working with the Greenway, funded in part by the Greenway, are having on the Niagara corridor. And I'm going to go through very quickly. Next. You've seen that one. Next. Okay, so in the Niagara River, we've focused on Grand Island, the available conservation areas on Grand Island, which are very unique, wet-footed, vernal pool habitats. You can see the map here. Our office is on Grand Island, and we spend a lot of time working in the Grand Island community to promote an awareness of conservation. Next. And the Western New York Land Conservancy has just completed a very comprehensive survey of the most attractive areas for conservation on Grand Island, and we're progressing conversations with those landowners and trying to raise the visibility of the importance of conservation. The last election went definitely in our favor on Grand Island, and we're quite optimistic about what we're going to be able to do there in the coming years. Next. This is more of the mapping that goes on to highlight the importance of these key strategic areas. We have another 42-acre parcel coming online, we hope, in 2024. We're just going to roll through these. The other focus area is Lewiston Youngstown, the inland abandoned farmland, which has gone back to fairly wet natural habitats, which are very important to the flyway and the escarpment. But for purposes today, we're talking about the Niagara River. Next. And a lot of work you can see here, again, the identification of specific parcels, which, if protected, would make a significant difference in the density of habitat, especially in those critical flyways where Jay Burney, who you'll hear next, is working so hard on promoting awareness of the birds that depend on these habitats. Next. Escarpment, next. Yeah, here now I want to shift to the work the waterkeepers are doing, both in the water and on the shorelines. One of the first major projects funded by the Greenway was a habitat inventory. The habitat inventory realized much of what Margaret was talking about moments ago, that we've lost over 2/3 of our coastal wetlands. In the Great Lakes, we've lost a higher percentage of that on the Niagara River. 56% of our island habitat. There were islands in the river which were mined as a source of gravel to build the thruway in 1956. Very recently, we put one of those islands back at phenomenal expense. It hasn't been done very often, I don't think, but it is critical habitat. Grass Island, Motor Island, Strawberry Island are much more important than we know. Even with Buff State studying fish habitats here, we really don't know what sustains the emerald shiner in the Niagara River, and that's kind of the first identifiable creature in the food chain, maybe, but the number of migratory birds and fish that depend on the emerald shiner is extraordinary, and it's not obvious to figure out what causes the ebbs and flows in their populations. And 85% of the Niagara shoreline has been hardened. So the Living Shoreline program, next, has been working closely between the waterkeepers and the Greenway to find the highest priority areas all up and down the Niagara River. We have, in addition to the Greenway funding, there's another source that flows from NYPA called HERF funding, which is for projects in the water every year. If you combine that with the work that the Army Corps of Engineers have done, the Niagara River, as you know, is an area of concern. Area concerns are prioritized for federal funding of ecological restoration, and the Army Corps of Engineers has made the Niagara River their top priority nationally, and they are determined to get it off the AOC list with a very focused effort on large projects. And so we have been the beneficiary of hundreds of millions of dollars of work in the Niagara River to restore and create better habitat. Some more focus. The Buffalo River is where the waterkeepers started. The work that's going on all up and down the Niagara now at a continued pace to identify the areas that would benefit most from living shorelines. Living shoreline is typically the softening of the shoreline and the allowing for natural structures which allow the fish to breathe and so forth. So I'm sure I'm at the end of I'm feeling the hook here. So, but what I want to leave you with is that the Greenway has shifted its focus and will continue to shift its focus. I'm confident in telling you that it is a much more effective organization than it was when it started out. And I believe that the Western New York Environmental Alliance, with 7 years to go between now and 2030, can make a significant difference. And we welcome your thoughts on how the Greenway can help you and be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. One of the things that was really important for me to recognize as Greg went through that presentation is that much of what Greg talked about was land that was not part of the land that Marcus was talking about. And I think that's really important to recognize that this 30 by 30 effort is not just pristine natural areas or less than pristine natural areas, but important habitat for wildlife in the woods. It's also the working landscapes. It's also the connecting corridors within the rest of the region. And so that's part of what we think needs to be brought to the table too, is that we think broadly about what 30 by 30 means. Our next speaker is Jay Burney. Jay serves as the advocacy chair of the Western New York Environmental Alliance. And those of you who know Jay know he wears many, many other hats as well. And he's going to wrap up this part of our program, and then we'll take a very short break, stretch break, and then return for the rest of our dialogue. Jay, yes, we have.
Thank you, everybody. It's great to see so many people here today. I really appreciate that you're here. I also want to thank John Whitney, Anna Popera, Margaret Wooster, Linda Schneekloth, and other people on the Western New York Environmental Alliance board for helping put this program together. And thanks to the Museum of Science. I want to do something first. We're going to be taking a short break right after I'm done. I want to take a selfie with all of you. This is, if you don't mind.
I took a picture of Jay taking the photo.
Thank you. So I'll go through this fairly quickly. We'll go to the next slide. So when I think of this, and I know when you think of this, I think of motivation. And just the first line of this slide, which is from Doug Tallamy's book and his philosophy, 95% of the United States has been logged, tilled, drained, grazed, paved, or otherwise developed. That's a lot. And that's, Western New York also, it's certainly more than that in places like Buffalo. So we have a lot of issues to deal with, and we have a lot of obstacles, and we have a lot of work to do. And the bottom line is, we have to do it. Each of us has to do it every day. And we have to celebrate this and work with our communities to make sure we can get to these kinds of goals, because the future of humanity is at stake. It really is. Nature will survive. The earth will survive. People may or may not. 30 by 30 is an effort to begin to develop ways for humanity, quality of life for future generations to be able to continue. Go to the next slide. I'm a birder, and one of my motivations is lack of biodiversity, lack of bird populations, insect populations, wildlife populations. Biodiversity is declining rapidly. We've lost over 3 million birds in North America in just the last 2 decades. That's continuing. It's continuing here, even though here we have an incredible diversity of birds and other stuff. Biodiversity in Western New York along the Niagara River corridor, along the Wildways area, is still very significant, globally speaking. So what we want to do as the Western New York Environmental Alliance is we want to promote and support leadership. We want to work with community engagement. We want to promote collaboration. We want to do strategy development. And we want to coordinate this discussion. It's a lot of work. We need all of your help. We're going to be working with governments, agencies, departments in governments, community groups, conservation and environmental groups. It's a big, big job, but we want to make sure that this conversation and this advocacy moves forward. The last part there is social justice and inclusion. That's an important part of this. We have to make sure that everyone's voices are heard and come to the table, because we have a tradition in conservation. Old white men like myself are the leaders. Having other people and other cultures involved. Listen, we've had Native Americans here for thousands of years, and they know what's going on, and we need to bring indigenous populations as well as people of color and new immigrants into the conversation. We won't survive. We won't get it done unless we do. One of the things that we have to do is characterize what ecologically productive means. Ecologically productive is kind of one of the groundworks of conserving 30 by 30, ecologically productive areas. Our area, Western New York, the connections that we have in that globe map, just with birds, right here in Western New York, right here in the Great Lakes, right here in the Niagara River, we have birds that come here and nest in the summer, that winter in the Amazon. We have birds that come here in the winter, that summer in the Arctic. When we do conservation work here, it's not just us. We have global connections. We have hemispheric connections. We can preserve and save the Arctic by doing conservation here. We can preserve and save the Amazon by doing conservation here, because their biodiversity is our biodiversity. We have great places here. The map, the photograph next to the globe was an outer harbor habitat, which has almost vanished. It's an important grasslands. The Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation has developed that. They're putting in parking and lights. The photograph on the bottom left is a land conservancy property called Stella Niagara, which is a beautiful property. If you haven't been there, it's a great place for biodiversity. And thank you so much for the Western New York Land Conservancy for taking care of that. And the picture up in the light, that's what Buffalo looks like from the lake. And so when we think about ecologically productive, lights are an issue for me, and I'll explain that a little bit more. So we'll be talking about that a bit. We'll go to the next slide. So we need to identify places. We need to identify places that have existing protections. We need to identify places that need protection. Marcus mentioned over 1 million acres in Western New York that we still need to get to our goal. That's a lot. Private and public lands, parks and parkways, designated conservation areas, nature preserves, urban and developed areas. How do we do conservation in urban and developed areas? There's ways. Forests, grasslands, lakes, rivers, streams, wetlands, agriculture, and farmland. These are all areas that we have to look at if we're going to reach the 30 by 30 goal, or the 50 half Earth goal, 50 by 50, which is coming up next after 30 by 30. What we're going to do is we're going to promote policy adoption. What are the policies that local governments have, or local organizations have, or businesses have to promote this? Keep going. We have some model policies, and this is one from I think it's town of Homer in New York. We have models that we can look at that talk about how we can get local governments, even companies, universities, to adopt. Go to the next one. We could promote ordinances. A lot of people that are involved with native plants understand that we still get tickets if we have wildflowers in our yards. So why don't we have ordinances that protect native wildflower gardens in our yards? Why don't we have ordinances that identify native trees as part of the urban forest? We have some, but we can do better, and that's part of what we need to develop with this collaboration that we're working on. There's a thing called biophilic or nature-friendly cities. There's a whole global program to help identify, characterize, and build cities that are more nature-friendly, including places like Buffalo. It includes things like appropriate lighting and noise ordinances. Again, lighting is so important because, for instance, birds, when they migrate, and Western New York is one of the most important migration areas in North America, they collide with buildings and die because of inappropriate lighting. So maybe even dark sky is something that we could think about as an ecologically productive concept. There's a big world, big universe that we can think about to make this kind of stuff come together. These are just some pictures of some local areas. That's Allegheny Park up on the left. This is a place called Aqualane Park on the Niagara River that the Greenway helped fund. It's a beautiful grass park that now has some beautiful native gardens there. And those are some of the birds that you see on the Niagara River. We have a lot of species of birds in the Niagara River, especially in the wintertime. We have, by the way, a winter bird festival coming up in February called Birds of the Niagara. If you want to know about it, I'll tell you about it. Let's go to the next one. Lights out. Now, this is such an important concept, and I know that it's sort of outside of the sphere of pollution, but light pollution is a big deal. That's our area from space. This bird, this little yellow warbler, suffers because of light pollution and noise pollution. Next. So we are proposing to create leadership, promote leadership, help coordinate leadership, and we want to create a leadership council. And please sign up if you haven't signed up, and stay involved with us. We'd like to be able to reach out with you. We need your voice. We need your voice. And I'll say it one more time. We need your voice. You have to be helping us. We all have to reach out to more people also to bring this in. Sign in, take our survey if you haven't. There's links to it out in the hall out there. And I just want to thank you again. And we're going to take a quick break, stand up, refresh, a very quick break, 5 minutes. There's bathrooms out there. There's a little bit of food out there. And thank you.
Thanks again, Jay. Jay said we will take a quick break. Everybody check your watches. Let's be back by no later than 11:13. 11:13, and we'll see you then. Well, Anna, could you bring the survey link up on the screen? That truly was really just supposed to be a stretch break and a quick bathroom stop if you needed to do that. I also realized I said check your watches. How many of you actually have a watch? It was probably a phone. It might have been a Fitbit or something like that. We're back. It's 12:13 by my Fitbit, and we're going to reconvene here. It'll take a minute to kind of settle in, but while you're coming into the room, most of you have probably gotten the message that we have a brainstorming survey that we're trying to capture ideas and thoughts and suggestions within. That link up on the screen, you've seen it maybe out at the tables, it's been posted here and there. But how many of you have already filled out the survey? So we need more hands to go up. If you haven't filled out the survey and you want to do it on your phone, grab it. Everybody pull your phones out, point it at the screen, and grab that survey. And if that doesn't work for you in that form, there's some paper ones out at the table, and they can be accessed through the Facebook page or the web page of the Western New York Environmental Alliance as well. Anna's going to do some more recording during this part of our discussion. If I could bring our speakers back up to the table. This next 46 minutes is going to be in the form of some discussion and dialogue and questions and answers for our speakers and presenters. So some of whom are not here yet, but Julie's making her way up. Marcus, if you can join us. Jay might still be visiting with the guests out in the lobby. And I also want to thank some of the organizations, all of the organizations who brought presentations and displays and tabling materials in that are out in the lobby. Feel free to visit with them as we break up as well. So we're bringing the rest of the speakers to the table as they become available. Nick was also out in the lobby trying to herd we cats back into the room, and mostly we're here. Jay showed this amazing image of the lights in the region, and that to me is a really powerful image, and especially with the idea that, well, Buffalo has a number of slogans, like it's the city of good neighbors. Shouldn't we also be the city of good neighbors to the other creatures that we share the neighborhood with? To me, that seems like it would be important. And another piece of that discussion is Buffalo, I guess like Paris, has the label of the city of lights. So maybe we should also be the city of lights out for at least a significant part of the migratory season. So the group is shuffling together around the live microphones, guys. Those are all hot, as you convene. The next part of our discussion, Anna's going to go ahead and bring up the survey that will help to lead some of our thinking. But we want to use this next period to I don't know what that was, Nick. Was a okay, got it. Okay. I missed that one. We're going to use this next period to have some dialogue, to begin some dialogue, because this is really pretty early in the 30 by 30 discussion in Western New York. Although it seems like, and it's good to know, there's a lot going on in Albany, we think, at least with DEC. Maybe not so much with some of the other agencies yet, but that all has to happen too. When I step away from the podium after the first questions start coming up, I'm going to move some microphones out into the room so that mostly so that your voices get recorded into the Zoom session and everybody hears you better. You still can plan to use your loud indoor auditorium voice so the room can hear you, but we want it to get captured on the recording as well. Or maybe Nick, if you want to move those, if you would please, out into the room. We'll kind of set one up so you can come to the mic as you have a question. So with that said, over a long period of time as we reconvened, who wants to start off either with a question or with a comment? Question or comment? I see a hand go. Stand up and come up to a mic, and we'll do it that way. And then we'll go to George.
I have a question about the regulations.
Come right up to the mic.
I have to like eat it. I had the regulations about the wetlands. Like there's been a lot of news about federal protections changing. And you mentioned about the DEC and different state regulations or whatever, provisions. So I was wondering where New York State stands on that with the rivers.
So a new law was passed on New York State wetlands, and we're currently working through the details of how we expect that to get rolled out. So I would actually encourage you to stay tuned and keep your eyes open for future invitations to provide comments and feedback because it's, the legislature passed a bill. We're trying to work through how that impacts day-to-day operations in terms of regulating wetlands. And so there will be extensive public comment periods for that. And we'll be actively trying to promote them. If you haven't signed up for DEC newsletters, it's fairly easy to do, and we'll provide that to the organizers after this. Local governments can also work to protect resources through their zoning. And so those are both, there's both state and federal or state and local opportunities to protect resources.
I think that's important to recognize. Regulations are critical, but regulations can also be changed. Court interpretations can change, and sometimes regulations don't get enforced. Has anybody noticed that? Yeah. So there's that piece as well. Go ahead. And also say your name, and if you're representing an organization, that will be useful too. Thank you.
I noticed a couple times comments made there about the loss of vertebrates, but no mention of the loss of invertebrates. And a lot of those vertebrates need invertebrates. They need to eat them, and directly and indirectly, they're important. I think that needs to be acknowledged. Then kind of a question and a comment together. On the one hand, we need to be thinking about that resilience to global warming, the effects of global warming, climate change, and what we plant and what we do with our environment to be ready for that. On the other hand, I suppose conserve would mean only do native vegetation, don't touch it, don't plant something that isn't the long established ecology there.
I think that just to quickly respond to that, I think fundamentally that's probably correct, but I'm not sure if we're locked into any of those ideas yet. That's part of what why we're having the dialogue, is to try to sort that out and settle in on what we think is locally, regionally, and globally important. Maybe native, it may be native genetics, but there's a lot of variation that has to be talked about
Okay. I mean,
across those
what you're
categories.
saying is that within that definition or metric of conserve, it wouldn't be impossible to plant something thinking of the future of climate.
Yes, that's actually one important key in that whole dynamic. Yeah, thank you for suggesting that as well. Go ahead to this one. Be thinking about, if you're in the back, using that microphone that's a little further back too when you're ready. But go ahead. Thank you. Introduce yourself. If you're with an organization, feel free to share that as well.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for hosting this event today. I'm Jessica Fleming. Hi, everybody. I'm not representing an organization, but I'm an internal medicine doctor here in the area, and I'm hoping to do some research in the future connecting the dots between healthy ecosystems, cancer rates, and human health. I guess one of the things that I was thinking about today, of course, as we all know, is every journey begins with a single step. And some of these ideas, of course, of which we're all convinced that are very important, feel very, very far away, kind of broad, and sometimes difficult to put a finger on exactly how you can contribute as an individual. And so I was wondering if the agencies, with your bird's eye views, have come together to make a repository of any sort with projects people can get involved with, both big and small.
Does anyone want to tackle that really big, important question? And if not, we are capturing it in the dialogue because it's important to address it further. But Jake, go ahead and take that for a minute. Thank you.
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by a repository. If you mean information, West New York Environmental Alliance is a group that tries to represent a lot of environmental groups. And so we can help you and other people understand. I mean, we have a membership list. And so that's the best I can offer. But yeah, it's a good idea. We need to know what each other is doing, collaborate with each other, and coordinate our work. And the groups you have here today, we're all working together. So that's a start. But thank you for the question.
Well, thanks, folks, for being here. Margaret, I had Dennis Galecki is the name. I do the Imagine Greater Buffalo program as a volunteer for the library for the last 14 years. Margaret was just a speaker in the last month. The idea of these, we're probably about to win a semiconductor award. We didn't get the hydrogen fuel in New York State that Plug Power might have benefited from. It's having a hard time, and it's in that scheduled commerce park, if you will, in the middle of a wetlands north of Batavia. I'm not sure which county owns it, but it's county purchase, a speculation of sorts. On the other hand, Syracuse has gotten Micron with about 9,000 jobs north of Syracuse, probably a nice farm area from the pictures I've seen. The point is, our Senator Schumer has combined all three cities, Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo, in a hopes of enhancing the bid for that semiconductor plant. And there it is, facing all sorts of challenges from the Native American lands around it. Pipelines have to be built, whole infrastructure. The question I have, how can this group start the discussion? Don't wait till it happens. Start the discussion with those three cities to say, we have in all three cities, certainly in Western New York, when I look at Niagara Falls, North Tonawanda, Buffalo, and Lackawanna, plenty of industrial space that our brownfields need to be cleaned up. This could be the beginning of that process. I know it's easier to just take virgin land and scrape it off and think you got a good deal going, but you've got a terrible deal going for sustainability over any period of time. This is a moment to change the next century for this Western New York region, but it has to start literally now, not when you win the bid and everybody knows what they're going to do with the money. Divvy up the money three ways. Give everyone, Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo, a chunk of it for their city limit expansion where the infrastructure exists and you're not messing with the wetlands and you're not doing all those things. How can this alliance help do that? I'd be glad to do it. I had Margaret on as a speaker. I'm developing next year's program. It's a weekly program, virtual. So, by the way, just go to the library site and just put in Imagine Buffalo on their YouTube site. And you will see Margaret's and many other, 135 other presentations. So that's my thought. It's kind of a challenge, but it says, don't wait till we win. We will win with Chuck Schumer as the senator, majority leader. I'd be shocked if we didn't win. Act now as if we are anticipating winning, and how do we benefit the cities and take away the problem from the wetlands? End of story. Thank you.
If I can just tag on to that, I think that you mentioned something really important, which is the state works hard to incent and support brownfields redevelopment. Our agency is actively involved in working with developers to repurpose and reactivate lands that were formerly industrial contaminated. And I can't say enough about how important those projects are to trying to be the balance for open space protection. Every brownfield we repurpose is a piece of greenfield that we can save. I would encourage everyone to get involved with their local municipalities in land use planning and in zoning and in economic development to say yes in our backyard on these former industrial sites, on these former mall sites, on these underutilized properties, so that you're inviting and telling your elected leaders where you want them to put the work. So often we're consumed with where we don't want things to happen. If we tell them where and what, that's really helpful because we can be moving in a positive direction.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. I mean, thank you for reminding me of that because I tend to, I'm discouraged, I have to admit, to about that question. I think we have tried to work with the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation, to some extent with the Genesee County Economic Development Corporation. Oh, sorry, is that better? We've tried to work with the economic development people, and the economic development agencies are killing us. I mean, I think the economic development agencies across New York State, whether they're state or county or local, are doing the worst work. The Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation is, hardening and digging up the outer harbor. Everything that naturally started to come back is being torn out. The Genesee County Economic Development Center is the one who's conceived and bought 1,200 acres of land to develop shovel-ready sites. Shovel-ready sites is what it's all about. And shovel-ready sites, I think we all maybe agree. I don't know. I certainly think it is digging our, when we do shovel-ready sites, we are digging our own graves. We're digging up the very earth that sustains us, the trees, the water, etc. So, but what you're saying, Julie, is we need to change our focus from fighting these entrenched economic development agencies, which our governor is a strong proponent of. So it's very hard to go against this, and work with our local communities on looking at the opportunities for revamping brownfields and so forth. I mean, I think we talk about this as an afterthought, but this thing, this was in the news on November 4th. Stamp site in Genesee County gets $56 million boost. And from Kathy Hochul, the latest funds are part of the state's Fast New York program designed to prepare more sites to host large employers and high-tech manufacturers. So that is speculative development defined. That's what it is. We don't have those. We're trying to lure them, and we're willing to,
We'll give them tax breaks too along the way on top
Right.
of that. So
how low can you
Margaret,
go?
as important as this is, let's return to the dialogue, but that's critical, and we need to be thinking about that all the time.
Thank you.
And Jay is going to have a quick follow-up. I did say quick follow-up,
It might not be that quick, John, but I think that,
but I can try.
I think, Dennis, your question is perfect. I mean, jobs are so important to our culture and our economy is so important. And we think about sustainability, resiliency. We think about the environment, culture, the economy. I always argue, and most of us do, the bottom line is the environment in that picture. Our economy, however, does not think that way. Our economy does not work well towards the environment. Our economy is an extractive economy. Why can't we have a bigger vision about a better way to do our economy that's not extractive of nature, that's not destructive of nature, that's not destructive of culture as it has become? We have worldwide cultural failures because of economics. And so I think that we have to rethink, and I'm speaking for myself, not the West New York Environmental Alliance, we have to rethink how our economy works. Capitalism on this globe, the way we practice it, has destroyed us. It's caused climate change. So we can do it. We can do it differently. We can think about better jobs, better paying jobs, jobs that protect the environment. And we have to. By the way, that's going to be part of this conversation.
And Nancy Smith, before we move to the next question, what would 56 million, I'll ask this of John Jablonski as well, what would 56 million do for local conservation efforts? Just 10,000 acres, maybe more. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure we all could, but there's another piece of it. Yeah. And the Outer Harbor property for that matter, and put it in a different form. Next question.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gwen Allegra. I'm a New York State Master Naturalist. I am also the chair of the Woodlands and Habitat Committee for the Crane Ridge Homeowners Association. Yes, we are an HOA and we are making some headway. I'm also a founding member of Grow with Springville. I guess my question for the group today is curious to know what are the steps in terms of strategic planning, action planning. I'm assuming vision and mission have already been well established. But I'm curious to know.
I actually think that's not the case. The vision and mission for this effort is not as well established as we think it probably needs to be.
All right.
So bring it up again. That's good.
So establishing new groups, having a well-defined, collaborated mission and vision are critical. And then out of that comes the strategic plan and planning. So I'm just curious to know where you all or when you anticipate those discussions are going to be happening. And I understand too and appreciate the level of input and collaboration that you are going to be inviting the community to participate in. So I'm just curious to know that strategic level that informs the planning. When is that going to be happening?
Does anyone want to tackle that?
I have one.
Go ahead and add to it, Margaret.
I will add to it. And that is that we are, so when we talk about what we do have here in terms of the wealth of our resources, one of those things is for indigenous nations who have their own sovereign territories. And so that's Tuscarora, the Allegheny Seneca, Cattaraugus Seneca, and the Tonawanda Seneca. And those territories, sorry, I keep forgetting, those territories are associated on maps that we've mapped with the highest water quality and the best land left in New York State. They are totally up there because these people have lived here for time unknown, centuries, and they know how to live on the land. Plus, they have an ethic, a land ethic that is, not something that we necessarily share. So one of the first things we can do is really make sure that we are working together with the Native American people, the indigenous people of Western New York, with whom we are rich, that to consider how to go, what to do. And it's probably even more crucial because one might say that what's happening in Genesee County with the Tonawanda Seneca is genocide. It is putting an industrial center within 200 feet of a sovereign nation that depends on its land and its big woods for its survival. So they're fighting this, at all levels. And there's a bunch of people that are in our group that are also fighting with them. But we need to do more of this.
Gwen, here's a quick answer. Thank you for that question. We hope to facilitate meetings regularly, bring people together. We also plan, and I'll make this commitment, to go to groups to talk about this. So we want to meet with people. We want to host things, and we have 30/30 isn't that far away. And so we're starting today. This is the kickoff. And we'll be doing something in December and January and February and March and April and May. So if you've signed up to our list, you'll find out about it, and we welcome you to help us.
And Julie, can you remind us what the DEC plans are for the near future? And
So we're in the middle of New York State has an open space plan, which it updates every 5 years. We're a little bit behind this cycle because of COVID. But the next meeting is going to be on November 21st. There'll be other meetings in December and January, and then there's going to be statewide public processes around that. And that's a legislative, kind of mandated structure process, but it's one that we would really actively invite everyone to participate in. We're looking at, there are a number of objectives for that open space, including climate resilience, as well as public access and environmental justice. So really encouraging that. And of course, New Yorkers voted on a $4.2 billion bond act, and open space protection is included in those resources. So as those rules for how those resources get allocated are put in play, again, participating in those activities as well as the wetlands law, lots of opportunities formally through the state for this movement to engage.
Yeah. I'm sorry. What was your question? Anna over at the table is taking notes in the chat, so we're recording it there. We had a question during the break about what we'll do with the recording of this early conversation, and we expect it will post on it as a YouTube link, and also we'll make it available through the Western New York Environmental Alliance's webpage, and it'll probably post on the Facebook page of the Western New York Environmental Alliance. And we have a commitment from Connie from Buffalo Niagara Gardening, and whoever else wants to grab it and share it broadly. We'll go to the next question. Yeah, thank you for that, though.
Sure. My name is Bernie Clabeau. I'm a director of Western New York Raptor. We're a wildlife rehabilitation organization. Great job today. This was amazing. It's really good to see that everybody's coming together for this common effort. Just a quick question in regards to at an individual level. Many people don't have time, right? I think everybody struggles with having full-time jobs, being super busy, being on 1,000 different committees. Many of us don't have time. So for those who want to be here, who can't be here because of time, how can people at an individual level get involved with this? Number one, so how can an individual get involved? And then number two is, if we know people with a lot of property, and we don't work for Land Conservancy, even though that would be an awesome job. And how do we connect them to Land Conservancy to get that property conserved? Because there's a lot of people that don't know where to start. I know there's 27 acres next to us that I've been working on. It's 27 acres, not like 1,000, but it's a wetlands, and it hasn't been looked at in a very long time, meaning I think it needs to be reevaluated. And it's not my property, but I know the people would be interested. Like, where do we start? What do we do?
Marcus, you want to grab that one initially, since Land Conservancy was mentioned?
Yeah, in terms of land protection, I mean, I can give out my card. So like, give us a call and we will definitely be excited to talk to anybody. But yeah, in terms of, in general, we are more than happy to talk with any interested landowner, any municipality. In terms of like our Wildway specific planning, we are just now in the starting phases of putting together a Wildway partner network, which will hopefully do a great job at working on a regional scale in our northern region and our southern region of kind of collaborating efforts, information, getting everyone from agencies to individuals, organizations, to get a kind of strategic plan for implementing the Western New York Wildway. So that would be a great way to get into individual landowners, people who have properties that they either are interested in having a conservancy purchase it, put a conservation easement on the property. They can still own the land, but protect the conservation values that are on it, or even just work to keep the property in their possession, but how can we implement, wildlife friendly practices and have that land be permeable? So at least for the Land Conservancy, we're working on the Wildway Partner Network that we're hopefully going to see that as a way to kind of pool that information and make it so that it is a way that interested landowners or those who just want more information on how they can be a part of that effort can get involved. So I can speak from that lens. At least.
With respect to this effort, if you aren't already and you do some social media stuff, follow the Western New York Environmental Alliance webpage and Facebook page, both of those, because we'll continue to try to feed information through that. I expect there'll be some information coming out through other agencies in more formal ways as well. Greg?
There were two questions there that asked the very Rachel and that one about what can the average person do to help if they want to. Jay began with Doug Tallamy's book, and Doug Tallamy's book picks up on E.O. Wilson's idea that, how would we conceivably preserve 30 to 50% of our land in North America? If you look at the amount of lawn in North America that gets mowed, that people do have time to mow, apparently, if they just stopped mowing that lawn and planted native gardens. There are a lot of ideas like that.
Maybe they only stopped mowing 30% of it, and we're still on our way to a 30% goal.
We're on our way, yeah.
Actually, while you're stepping up to the mic, I'll point out up on the screen, those are the questions that are in the survey. That's another way that people who are not here or people who are here and want to put some ideas together can help with the general brainstorming that we think will help to inform the dialogue over the coming months. But it has to happen quickly. So go and do your survey if you haven't already. It won't take you too long. But we have questions like, what kinds of landscapes, land or water should be considered? Well, it's clearly, from my perspective, not just the wild lands. It's not just the riparian corridors. It could be those larger backyards or front yards or a whole range of things. So put your perspective in there for those kind of questions. What measures should be used? Marcus mentioned conservation easements. Well, that's one. Acquisition is another, but there's a whole range of measures that should be used, including what we hope we'll be able to get many municipalities in Western New York to do, which is to adopt some of those 30 by 30 ordinances and other related ordinances that Jay talked about. So fill us in on those thoughts. What are the benefits of 30 by 30? What to me seems most important to help promote this whole idea is for people to recognize what the benefits are. Most of us in the room probably have a pretty good idea of at least what's important to us, although that may vary quite widely too, I'm not sure. But put down what you think those benefits are. And similarly, what are the obstacles? Because 2030 is not very far away. Some of the groups in this room have been working on this subject matter for 20, 30, close to 40 years or longer, and we're pretty far away from these kind of goals still. Clearly, there are obstacles or we'd be closer. So your idea about what those obstacles are. And one of the questions that's up here that I think is really nice is that, is there a place that's particularly special to you? And let us know, and we'll help feed that into the groups that might help protect that particular spot, or that particular area, or that particular watershed, whatever the scale of your interests and considerations might be. Who's missing from the conversation? That's really important. And as Jay talked about, when we're talking about inclusivity, we're also trying to avoid eco-gentrification or geriatric gentrification. I'm not sure which one is more important, but those are things that also need to inform the discussion. Let's move again to the lines of questions that are starting to form. We'll catch the one there and then we'll come to the front.
Okay, super. Thanks a lot. My name is Matt, lifetime environmentalist. And
Step right up to the mic, Matt.
yeah,
a little
sure
further.
thing. So my name is Matt. I consider myself a lifetime environmental activist. I've got a YouTube show called Vox Terra, or I host it. That means Voice Earth in Latin. But the reason I want to make a comment is when I heard Marcus talking about the Western New York Land Conservancy, and I'm noticing the farmland, it just brought to mind a conversation I had with a farmer who told me he gets 80% of his power from one wind turbine. And he told me he doesn't understand the opposition to wind because it's well above the tree line and you can farm with it. And I want to point out that in an interview with Peter Kalmus that I heard, he's a NASA scientist, climate activist, he said any solutions to climate change that don't include a rapid scaling away of fossil fuels are, I think he used the word, a distraction. And now I know from going to enough environmental conferences that opposition to wind always works its way in there. And I want to point out the Audubon Society, premier birding society, supports wind turbines when it's responsibly sited. And the anti-wind narrative leaves out the daily cost of extracting, refining, processing, burning fossil fuels. And I would add in nuclear to that as well. So I'm hoping, since I'm seeing this 30 by 30, we are including some human interfered with land that we're going to put on the table, responsibly sited wind turbines, given that the opposition to wind is succeeding and we are almost in a way burning through our chance to have a renewably powered economy due to the heating planet and the destabilization of the weather patterns. So I just want to put that on the table. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's important to bring into the conversation as well. Thank you.
If I could just quickly, I think we are really lucky in New York State to have one of the most aggressive and assertive climate plans in the country. And if you just go on, put in New York Climate Plan, you'll be able to kind of monitor that process, our investments in renewables, our investments in a whole range of climate preparedness actions. And again, really, but as you know, there's been a lot of pushback over the last year. And I think and as it comes to getting rolled out, I would encourage everyone to reinforce, if you're in support of those climate implementation actions, to continue to make sure you're telling your elected leaders in Albany and locally that you are in support of them. They need to hear as much from those in support as they hear from industries or opponents to specific parts of that implementation. We need to keep that action up. And we're really lucky to have amazing leadership in New York State on this.
Thank you again. Yeah, so again, we're capturing these comments. You can make sure they're also captured if you do the survey or send us an email, any number of ways to kind of keep the conversation going and participate in the future sessions as well. We'll come to the front here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ann McCooey, and I'm the executive director at the Black Rock Riverside Alliance. And for the last 4 years, we've been working really hard to get Buffalo, Erie County, and Niagara County registered as wildlife habitat communities through the National Wildlife Federation programs. We've already done Buffalo and Erie County. They are now the 6th and 16th largest habitat communities in the country. We are going to finish up Niagara County within the next probably 8 months, and we are mentoring Chautauqua County to get that certified as well through the Chautauqua Watershed Conservancy. This is going to create an NWF wildlife habitat corridor along the west side of New York State, something we're really proud of. So for those of you who want to know what you as an individual can do, the certification is based a lot on Doug Talmey's book and his principles of creating wildlife friendly habitats. It's a grassroots effort. It is literally one property at a time. So for those of you that want more involvement, definitely check out either the Alliance website, the BRR Alliance website, or the NWF wildlife website and get your yard certified. The thing that I want to address to the committee and to the group, because we're one of the newest partners in the Western New York Environment Alliance, and so having been able to get too involved, we have found in our work with the Habitat Project that we've been doing is that the way to get this done is to get to our youth, because it needs to continue. It can't die off with our generation. And at first we thought, oh, we're going to go to the high school conservation students and get them involved. And most of them think that a lot of them are taking those courses just because they think it's an easy A and an easy elective. We have found we need to get to the middle school kids. We need to get lower and deeper, because if we want to hit 50 by 50, that's the generation that's going to be pushing it forward. So we need to seriously find ways to dedicate this message into, or integrate this message into, our school systems.
Thank you, Sylvan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much again for putting this together. I know many of you here, but for those that I have not met, my name is Sylvan Ashbrook, and I'm here representing Grassroots Gardens of Western New York. We are a community garden organization, so we help facilitate the growth and development of community gardens, not just in the city of Buffalo, but in Niagara Falls as well. And one of the reasons I think that we're a significant voice in this conversation is because we are a certified land trust. And so we're using our land trust status as a way to protect community garden resources, which for many communities is one of the only green spaces that they have, quality green spaces that they have in their communities. And so I wanted to bring up the fact that, you know, we're working more in urban spaces, and I understand the importance of large landscape conservation, but I feel like, and I appreciate that you mentioned this, Jay, the importance of microhabitat, right? And like many small properties over a large geographic area make a significant impact. I appreciate how much these spaces benefit creatures like birds and insects that don't necessarily have to rely on such large distances to gather the resources they need to live and exist. You know, I would be more than happy to work with folks on urban conservation and what that might look like, not only in the city of Buffalo, but in Niagara Falls as well. It's something I'm very passionate about, and interested in native plants too. So
again, we'll look to the engagement of Grassroots Gardens in this ongoing dialogue as well. But you make up the important point that it's not just about landscape scale, it's backyard scale, it's front yard scale, it's cemetery habitat, it's all kinds of different possibilities that can be brought into the mix.
I wanted to bring up too, Doug Talamy's Homegrown National Park for folks that want to look at other resources. That's another effort that he's worked on, and an amazing site that I think, in concert with the National Wildlife Federation's resources, can prepare you really well for that effort.
Thank you. John Jablonski. John, for those of you who know, John was the founder and longtime executive director of the Chautauqua Watershed Conservancy. He might have said that, but he's also a college classmate of mine from we graduated in 1982. That's a while ago now, and a fraternity brother as well. So we could do the secret handshake if we remembered it, but we're getting too old.
Thank you, John. The Chautauqua Watershed Conservancy is part of this Wildway effort, and I commend all of you for putting together this Western New York Environmental Advocates effort, 3030 effort. It's so timely and needed, and I would like to bring your attention, if you're not aware of it, that the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation is part of a Hudson River Estuary local governments program, and they're putting on wonderful webinars and in-person sessions on exactly the things we're talking about. What can local governments do? What can planning boards do to preserve open space and identify important streams and wetlands in their own communities, and what laws to adopt and how to incorporate those into their project review process, and hopefully have the tools to access the resources available to conserve sites like this. And I would encourage the DEC in our region to partner with those people at DEC and Cornell and try to get those programs offered in Western New York. Similar issues, similar needs, and be great to adapt what's going on there to all of the municipalities of Western New York. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Looking at our timing devices. We have time for a few more questions, so don't step back from the microphone. Go ahead and do that. But we will kind of keep an eye on things for the next 5 minutes. So.
Hi, Janet Lenachek, Sierra Club Niagara Group. I'm the local chair, and we cover 7 or 8 counties in Western New York. I guess going back to some of the things that Margaret said, as well as Julie, I feel like some of these development projects, like the stamp project, we were behind the 8 ball. In other words, these projects were in planning process for 10, 13 years. And it's only like in the last couple, maybe the last year or two, that the general public sort of found out about it and environmental groups found out about it. And I guess my question goes back to, do people in the environmental community have to start sitting in the economic development committee meetings of each of their towns and counties to get a sense of what's coming down the pike in order for us to be more aware ahead of time before things and money starts getting dumped into these projects by the state, so that we have a voice earlier in the process? Because I do sense that sometimes we're just way behind the 8 ball, and it's like David and Goliath. Now you're David and you're fighting this giant monster that's been in process for 10 years or more and has $56 million behind it. Anyway, if anybody can answer that.
Yeah, whether it's Davy or Goliath or tilting at windmills, all those kind of challenges that we're faced with. 2 more questions. So
just yes, resounding yes. So as much as we participate on municipal conservation boards, sit in on the planning board, get involved in those activities, get involved in your master planning and your zoning updates and read them. They're not fun, but if we can think about, but as you're driving by and you see that, kind of shopping plaza that's been underutilized and is really struggling, talk to your town councilman and your town supervisor about them and say, this would look at, it's got all these great things. It's got, maybe that's a place to push economic development. Or if you see an industrial site that's not moving, nothing's happening with it, write to their site operator and write to your local government officials and encourage them to mobilize those sites. They very often have utilities, they're big plots of land, they're heavily developed, and there's tax incentives to help them move over into new activities.
New York State's also a home rule state, which makes me wonder how many municipal officials are in the room today. John, that your special category of municipal official, so thank you. There's one. So who's missing from the conversation, largely? And can we have major impacts without their involvement and engagement? That's a message for all of us, I think, to be aware of. So your question.
Yes, my name is Eve Evelyn Wackett. I'm a wildlife rehabber. I volunteer for the SPCA. And I'm really green behind the ears with all this. I've never been an environmental activist, but as in April, I attended the Earth Day celebration and I saw Margaret Wooster's presentation on the stamp project, and I decided to learn a little bit more. And since then, I've learned quite a bit, and I feel like I'm trying to step up a little bit. But what I'm finding, what you just said, who's missing from the room? The governor, Schumer. I mean, all these people I've been writing, calling, going to Facebook, going to Twitter. I don't get any responses. One day I did go to a presentation that the governor had, and I walked up there I drove up there and they asked me who I was, and this is a private event. And I said, I realize it's a private event, but I've been trying to write to the governor and I'm not getting an answer. But what I want to say is we need to raise our voices. And how do we do that as individuals? And I keep feeling like I'm screaming into the void. Nobody's listening to me. And I know there's a lot of organizations out there that do want to fight against stamp and what's going on. And David did beat Goliath. So I think we need to raise our voices and get these little dots connected, that all these organizations here that want to support and build this thing, we just need to raise our voices and get more out there and invite the governor and invite Chuck Schumer to these meetings and see if we can get some more answers that way. And the last thing I'll say is the indigenous cultures say to think 7 generations ahead. So what Ann said about reaching out to those middle schoolers, I think is a great idea. Get them involved with it.
Was there one more question? Go ahead and we'll let you wrap up for us as well. That's a lot of pressure, isn't it?
Well, I would just like to respond to that. I absolutely agree. We just had an election, and what people can do is participate in their election and make sure that the people that are making the decisions could have been people sitting in this room. Instead of trying to persuade people, we should be electing our own so that they will be with us. And I hope that we'll have some politicians join this effort as part of this movement to have 30 by 30. And what we can do as individuals is we can contribute to candidates that are true environmentalists. We can work on their campaigns, and we can elect them. And we have just helped elect some people that will be with us in the future. So that would be mine.
I actually think that's a great way to wrap up our session this morning. Any last comments from the table? I really don't know that we want to do that.
I have just one, which is, as much as I want to totally, and we need to continue to work engaging youth, I'm getting a lot of gray hair. I've had it for a couple of years now. I also think that we need to continue to stay in the game. We cannot lay all the responsibility a couple generations out. We don't have time. And there's a certain amount of liberation for someone who's more sophisticated, who's been around the block a few times, who can get the ear of someone who was their, fraternity brother or worked with them or understands their networks.
What did David Suzuki call it? The wisdom of the elders.
I would encourage us both to reach out to youth and use the wisdom of the elders in this next fight, because we need everyone.
Oh, do I get to talk? I want to say one last thing.
Okay.
And that is that what we are finding, and I'm really riding hard on the economic development agencies, because these are the people who are building the shovel-ready sites that are going to kill us all. We can't get into those meetings. We didn't find out about STAMP until about a year ago, maybe 2, I'm not sure, but it's been going on, as you said, for 13 years. Very secretive. I've tried to go to the meetings on Zoom, and they adjourn to executive session when they start talking about anything important. So people never knew. And with the ECHDC on the Outer Harbor, we were not allowed to come to their meetings. They closed the door. We were not allowed to come to their meetings when they made any kind of decisions. So although we kept track, we weren't invited. So what does that mean? It means we have to fight harder. We really have to stand up. If something, I'm polite, I'm okay, no, we can't do that. We have to go, and we have to insist.
Okay, so here's the risk. Linda was pointing to someone who wanted to say something. That invites someone else to want to say something, but you were trying to get to the mic. Can you get to that one? Let's do this, and then we'll call it. Because we did start 5 minutes late, we get 1 more minute.
Diplomatic, John. My name's Craig Carlson, and I want to thank everyone who put it together and who's sitting here and who has so much history and experience and connection. But what I really truly think is that you need to get seeds in people's hands. You want a hub like the Museum of Science here to show people how it's done simply. I'm more a gardener. I get so restless in meetings. I don't know about anybody else, but my ass is tired of sitting. And I grant you so much respect for doing what you do. But I really honor people who say, get it to the children, because if you have a block of children saying, we want this, and they show it's done, your politicians have to pay attention. And that kind of force is you folks get stuck, and I can hear all the stuckness. Children don't get stuck. They get busy. They get their hands in the dirt. They get connected to each other. It's there. It's really there in my vision.
Well, let's one more time thank everyone. Let's all get busy out in the hallway with some more conversation. We thank the speakers. We thank the Science Museum staff and facility for allowing us to be here today, and we'll carry on over the coming months and years.